Good morning, everyone. My name is Joel Rosenthal, and I have the pleasure of serving as president of Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs. And to begin, I want to wish you all a very happy Global Ethics Day and welcome you to this year's keynote event. Today marks the 11th Global Ethics Day, Carnegie Council's annual moment to empower ethics as a force for good. To help frame our panel on next generation civic leaders, I want to share a few of my own thoughts on ethical leadership and the role that ethics must play in meeting this challenging moment in world affairs. In light of growing partisanship, increasing violence, and the often irresponsible deployment of emerging technologies, it's essential that we recognize ethics as a vital tool for responsible leadership. For some, ethics has become an exercise in zero-sum thinking. And for others, ethics is merely an instrument to advance their personal truth or tribe. In a world of alternative facts and purposeful disinformation, genuine moral reasoning is a frequent casualty. These days, ethical argument often takes the form of righteous indignation and moral certainty. In this context, if you disagree with me, not only are you wrong, but you're also a bad person. But we don't need to accept this as the status quo. Whether you attend university, work in the private sector, or serve in government, we all must challenge ourselves to recognize a few universal truths. No one is perfect, and no one has a monopoly on virtue. Throughout our lives, values will conflict and trade-offs are inevitable, but we must recognize that one-dimensional moral assertions do far more harm than good. Ethics aims toward a telos, or an ultimate purpose. Its main feature is an iterative process of zigs and zags, open to correction and revision. In this way, ethics is a practical tool rather than a static set of principles to be taken off a shelf. There is seldom just one course of action for addressing a complicated challenge, but often several, each with different benefits, risks, and undesirable consequences. It is at this decision-making crossroads that ethics can help guide us. Throughout my own career, I've had the privilege of engaging with leaders from around the world, and I've learned that it's essential to balance conviction with humility. We tend to overcomplicate ethics, but at its core, ethics is about self-discovery. What are my values? What are my standards? What do I expect of myself and the institutions I work with? It's impossible to get ethical choices right all the time. So it's essential to be open to reflection and correction along the way. In the practice of leadership, I constantly ask, what is my true north? What am I willing and not willing to do to achieve a goal? And how might those whom I respect judge my actions? To close, I'll leave you with this advice. Remember that leadership is goal-driven, but it is also compromise-ridden. All of you will undoubtedly face compromises throughout your personal and professional lives. And while there's no magic formula, the process of ethical reflection can serve as a powerful tool in living a good life. Finally, as you advance your studies and careers, beware of those preaching moral perfection, as they are often the enemies of the good. So with that, it's my pleasure to pass the microphone to our moderator for today, Carnegie Ethics Fellow, George Commanda. George, thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you. Thank you for that thoughtful remarks, one that I believe re-echoes the call for ethics as a force for good in a turbulent world, and a recognition of its indispensable role in shaping our varied personal and professional experiences. Welcome to all of you joining online or in person, particularly our audience today, our student audience. Welcome. Welcome to Carnegie Council, and we're pleased to have everyone join us today in celebration of Global Ethics Day. As Joel rightly noted, my name is George Shadrack Commander, a Carnegie Ethics Fellow, a civic leader, a diplomat, and I'll be today's moderator as well as a co-panelist because this is a very important conversation that I believe as a young leader like myself can contribute to. With me for this important discussion, I have two brilliant youth leaders, Ms. Catherine Grote, research analyst at Freedom House, Ms. Zalash Samast, civic engagement program coordinator at Open University Network Osun. Just to caveat a bit, the importance of Global Ethics Day as conceptualized and envisioned by Carnegie Council cannot be overstated. In the light of current global challenges, whether it's climate change, economic injustice, negative application of artificial intelligence, wars and conflict, Joel's remarks earlier, embarks on the role of ethics in responsible leadership and in the iterative nature of shaping a national, personal decision making. So with that, and the overall context for our discussion today, our panel would like to share insight because as young leaders, we have voices. We have the power to influence policy, to make better decisions. We want to see how we can enhance youth participation and intergenerational collaboration in civic life to tackle the most pressing issues and challenges that we face at the intersection of ethics and international affairs. So with that overall context, I would like to begin our conversation today by asking our distinguished panelists, myself included, one very simple question. How has your personal experiences shaped your understanding of ethics and influenced your personal decision making? Maybe Catherine, I could start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, George. And it's really, really great to be here with everyone. And thank you to those who are calling in. I mean, it's a tough question. And it's a big question, right? For, I guess, a little introduction, I work at an organization called Freedom House. I work on our research team, and we put out several annual reports that assess kind of the global state of freedom, very broadly, political rights and civil liberties. We also put out a report on internet freedom, so all of the kind of online human rights that people are able to enjoy. And Freedom House's mandate is essentially a mission where the entire world is free. And this, just like this conversation around ethics and international affairs, freedom and human rights, these are incredibly broad topics, and they're really, really hard, especially when you take this kind of global perspective. And I think, one thing that I try to think about when I'm approaching this work, especially when it starts at such a high level, I mean, the mission for a whole free world is wonderful, and it is also incredibly challenging. And I think looking at kind of the small scale efforts where these, actions are taking place, whether it's through grassroots civic organization, through, protest movement or media or, defending human rights protectors, things that are happening even in some of the most closed and repressive societies at a very small scale can actually have very large ripple effects rather than thinking about it in kind of a top down, maybe government or state oriented way. So I always try to approach my work of, there are big solutions that are needed everywhere, but there's also piecemeal change that's happening in real time by real people at a much smaller scale that's having really meaningful impact. And I think when you can kind of parse down, take these very big, huge kind of academic concepts and put them into practical life, it's made it easier for me to kind of tackle some of these bigger challenges.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for that insightful, but also one that really engage on the several instances. You talk about piecemeal solution, you talk about big solutions. And with that, I can pass it over to you, Zara.
Of course. So hi, everyone. Good morning. I think ethics has been something that I had to learn through different experiences. I grew up in Afghanistan, and throughout my life, I worked with several different organizations that helped me understand what ethics are, but also through some of the experiences that I have personally been. Back when I was in Afghanistan, I was working with the International Committee of the Red Cross. And the work that we did involved working with both parties involved in the conflict, meaning several different sides that sometimes are not accepted by people. So our work was really, really difficult. And I think that is one experience that helped me understand ethics, the importance of ethics in day-to-day life. And I think one experience that really shaped who I am today, but also helped me understand even more the importance of ethics was in August 2021, when we had to evacuate a group of Afghan students from Afghanistan and bring them to the US so that they can be able to continue their studies and live a very normal life. That was a part where as I was going through that experience, and helping in the evacuation process, I had to learn different aspects of ethics. And I think it was mentioned earlier by Joel, how we don't always have to pay attention and practice not that we don't have to practice, but ethics can also be very small things, like paying attention to if a girl is comfortable being evacuated with another group of students that also involve male students. It's paying attention to the importance of making people feel comfortable. And I think for me today, based on all the experiences I've been through, ethics include behaving nicely with people, being kind to one another, especially in the world that we live in today, where we are facing so many uncertainties. So simply checking in with each other, asking how everybody's doing in your professional working environment, in family, with friends, that's how you practice ethics on day-to-day basis. I was told most of our audience today are students, so I would like to also reflect a little bit on how traveling outside of Afghanistan and studying in different institutions helped me understand, pay attention to being in environments where we have people from different cultures, different political, different views that the students have, and how paying attention to all of those and making sure nobody's feeling uncomfortable are important and are part of ethics, in fact. So, yeah.
Thank you, Zah. I think from my side, I can really go back deep to my own lived experiences. I can resonate with your own shared experience. Following the 10-year civil war in Sierra Leone, because even today it's a very difficult conversation for so many people, including myself. But what I learned throughout that process, throughout the 10-year civil war, I believed it has shaped my personal experiences and my professional decision making. Because of the aftermath of the war, seeing people with, sorry to be a bit graphic, but chopped off limbs, amputated legs, it's really, was a very heavy side. But with that experience, I told myself that I have to do better, that citizens must do better, that we can do better by doing what is right and making sure that we have democratic governance in the right places, because I believe some of the factors that led to the war was because of the misuse or abuse of maybe some of our natural resources or citizens being unsatisfied and things like that. So, but those experiences really shaped my understanding about rights and responsibility, shaped my understanding about civic accountability, because it's one thing to be a leader, but it's also another thing to actually help our leaders become better leaders and as well followers or citizens in that respect. So I deeply resonate with what you shared, because I believe ethics starts from the personal. We have to be accountable on a daily basis. And with both of your insightful explanation, I think it's good timing for us to shift to the next question, which I think will definitely be intriguing, but at the same time, reflective on the previous question. So, in what ways have civics and ethics played a role in your professional life? Drawing upon your work at Freedom House, in your case, and for you at Osun, respectively. So I'll start with Zah for this one.
Absolutely. I think I first started learning about ethics, what role it has played in my professional career. I think the most important role. I think I started my professional career back when I was studying my undergrad at the American University of Central Asia. And I had this project, it was called Recovering Forgotten Conflicts. And through the Recovering Forgotten Conflicts project, I wanted to tell the stories of people who were affected by war in my country, in Afghanistan. So I had a small camera, I would go and take pictures of people, and I would also collect their stories and write down their stories and organize these small scale photo exhibitions where I would invite people to learn about what happens after a bomb blast. What is the part of conflict that is kind of forgotten? And so my main idea was not just for people to pay attention to how many people were killed or how many houses were destroyed, but who were those people and how this conflict has affected them. And through this work, I had to learn the importance of paying attention to becoming a professional and paying attention to whether or not somebody wants their face to be in a picture and be known as a person who's been affected by a war. So I had to work different ways. And what I want to say through this story is that ethics can help. Ethics has highly helped me in my professional career today by helping me understand those small details that are very important. And moving on from that, I think learning all those small important aspects helped me apply my experience to bigger experiences, like the evacuation of Afghan students from Afghanistan, like currently working with students who are displaced and relocated in the United States from countries like Gaza and Russia and Ukraine and all the other places where we have conflict going on. So I think that the principles of ethics are important to apply no matter where you work, it doesn't matter if you're working in civic engagement sector or educational sector or political sector, there is always ways to incorporate the principles of ethics in your day-to-day life, in your interactions and the work that you do. And I think incorporating the principles of ethics in those sections help us create a better world, create a world where we can work by getting along with each other, working more peacefully, working comfortably, and making sure that the work that we're doing by incorporating the principles of ethics make a better difference and a bigger difference.
Thank you very much, Zah, and over to you, Catherine.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good question. And I think one of the themes that I've heard Zar talk about, as well as George, is kind of, the small scale changes. I mentioned this as well. So when I'm kind of talking about what we do at Freedom House, so we put out these reports and they are massive. They cover 210 countries and territories around the world, and they are essentially underpinned almost by like an ethical framework. We're looking at, how people are able to exercise their rights, their liberties, their freedoms around the world. So the kind of output itself is, right, this assessment of essentially ethics and how people are able to live their lives. Are their rights protected or are they undermined? But to kind of narrow that down, I think one of the things that I like to think about is, it's not just the output, but it's how we're doing our work and like walking the talk and kind of embodying some of those things that we put forward, the recommendations we make in our research. And it starts with, our day-to-day at a very small scale level that isn't seen in some of kind of the more prominent communications, like materials, the report, these events that we do. So for example, to produce this massive report called Freedom in the World, we work with country analysts all over the world. So these are people who are experts in a given country or territory. They are academics, they're civil society leaders, they're journalists. And one of the ways that we like to work is to try to work with people who either live or are from the country that they are covering. But of course, this is not always possible. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing safety and security. So in certain cases, right, if we're covering North Korea, it would be really unsafe to work with someone in that country, given the repressive nature. So we have to think on a day-to-day basis. Not only do we want to produce rigorous research, but we want to make sure that the people who are working are able to do it in a safe manner that's going to, again, produce these products that are really important tools for policymakers, for researchers, for academics, but that the people who are doing the work, the people who are behind the scenes a little bit of these kind of massive products are also, prioritized in an ethical way, that we're making sure that they are able to do the work safely. We also try to make sure to, eliminate bias. Bias is a kind of unavoidable thing in this sort of work, but one thing we do when we're doing these country reports is to make sure that we're working with independent folks, people from civil society, not working with governments who may have a vested interest in kind of how their countries are portrayed. So I think this kind of goes along with these other themes of having this ethical framework, not just in kind of the broad, big world view, but at your own personal level, and kind of integrating that into how you work, which is important to me.
Thank you, Katrin, for connecting the dot. I believe you mentioned you hinted at the universal applicability of ethical principles. Wherever you are, doing the little things. Making sure that what is right, I think, is right to that extent. And also, you talked about rights being protected. I think I resonate with that too. And from my own personal experience, I believe both ethics and the role of civics really have played and continue to play a very pivotal role in my understanding of rights and responsibilities. I also believe in the school of thought, and based on my experience living in Africa, of coming from the global south, that everything rises and falls at the doorstep of responsible citizenship and ethical leadership. Because with those two caveats, I believe we can empower our society, but at the same time, we can really get to the nooks and crannies of issues that really affect us in our society. So what do I mean by that in terms of citizenship? I believe it's the input or the output that you have within yourself to say, I'm going to be better, I'm going to be an everyday citizen, I'm going to be active, I'm going to engage, but I'm also going to make sure that I follow the rules and also be there for other people. In terms of leadership, of course, speaks to the way we carry ourselves individually or in a public and private life. Because when we look at our society today, we see the decline of leadership. I would go as far as to boldly say, in my individual capacity, that we see the decline of ethical leadership. And with such conversations, I think that young leaders or young people really trying to harness, we can really make that difference and be able to reflect on how ethics empowers our individual decision. So with that caveat, I think Joel mentioned something in his insightful remarks, because every time I listen to him speak, I learn so much, not only about current realities, but about our understanding of our current realities, because it's very important that we know what we are doing today. So on that basis, I would really like to caveat a final question by asking you to reflect on how you view ethics as a North Star. I think he mentioned that word, as a North Star. How do you view ethics as a North Star, or that guiding principle, in your personal and professional life to date? So with that, I think I will start with Katrin.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I really like the North Star phrasing. And it's a hard question. I think, again, going back to so many things that have been said, it starts at a personal level. I think people who work in this field, we almost might take for granted, right, some of the underpinnings of things like international humanitarian law, human rights conventions, this kind of body of work that we all operate in, and is this given that we're doing good work, it is all ethical, but it's not enough, and I think this is something that is kind of part of the global ethics day kind of messaging, right? That it's not enough to just have these frameworks on the books, but you have to put them into practice. It has to be an active engagement, starting at the personal level. And I think, one thing that I kind of keep in mind comes from my time when I was doing more humanitarian aid work in Lebanon. This was years ago. And kind of one of the central tenets is, do no harm, make sure that, it's taking yourself at like what is happening, what is every decision you're making, and what is the impact, even if you're under this umbrella of we are, doing good, we're providing services, making sure that it is done in collaboration with the people who are going to be, impacted by these decisions. So one thing I think about just kind of every time I'm, engaging in this work is, am I the right person to be doing this? If I'm, given the opportunity to write an op-ed on global affairs, something in the Middle East, I always like to think, am I the right person? Is it my voice that people need to hear, or would it be more impactful to co-author this report with someone from the country that I'm talking about? Would it be more impactful to step away and let someone else raise their voice and have that platform? I think ethics, a lot of times we were talking about conviction, is of course standing up for what's right, staying true to kind of the things that we all value and believe. But I think it's also about knowing when to step back and knowing when maybe it is better to, share your platform, share your leadership position, share your power with people who are going to, one, be able to benefit from that, but whose voice might be more important to your own. So that's one thing that I think is kind of the North Star of how I approach this work.
Thank you. I really appreciate the way you skillfully just break down a very tough question, because when we talk about ethics, we also have to look at it also not only our personal ethics, but professional ethics. And with that, Zah, what would be your perspective on this?
Absolutely. So I think I would echo everything Catherine just shared, but also say that I think embracing empathy and fairness are very important, and approaching the topic and implementation of ethics again on day-to-day life. And I think today, right now, is it looking at everything that is happening around the world, we can see how important it is for all of us living in the world to embrace ethics, embrace all the principles of ethics, fairness and empathy, to make sure that we are playing our role as individuals to make the world a better place and to play our part in problem solving and in solutions, whether that is raising awareness about what we see, talking about what we see, talking about what we think is injustice, to the people that we think can help support in a way that we are not harming anybody else's belief or rights. So I think I would conclude by saying that moving forward after this panel today, observe everything that is happening around you and try to see what it is you can do as an individual in your space, whether that is in your family or at the office or in your classrooms or when you're with your friends. I think always keep an open eye, observe, and see where ethics is missing, and what can you do to remind people that what's going on is not right, and what can be done to bring a change. So observe and talk about it, and remember the principles of ethics, and play your part.
Wow, that's very, very. I can also echo the responses from both Katrine and yourself. I think, for my part, faith and ethics, in general, and having the hope to pursue it, I think, respectively, have been my unwavering North Star. When I hear you both speak, I see the need for individual and collective responsibilities, understanding the rights and duties, and making sure that we bring everyone along, but doing that with the power of collaboration, with the power of knowing that everyone belongs in a society. And I really feel really connected to that. If I can recall my own journey, starting at a very young age in Sierra Leone, June 16, African Day, that was my first exposure to anything public speaking, to anything being of advocacy to others. Now reflecting as a young diplomat at the seat of international diplomacy at 32, representing my country, and reflecting on how my role too as an educator and author really in shaping the understanding of generations maybe in my own bracket, but also those after me, about the importance of civic rights and civic responsibility, and in general as a civic leader from the global south, and knowing that we have difficult issues to talk about, but once we sit at that table, we engage constructively, we engage knowing that our actions matters and our inactions also matters. And I really feel that that connection is very important for me to really reflect on, and just on a personal note for me, just to wrap this section up, I think in a world often driven by titles, I believe personally that in the power of performance over position or over any title that you may hold in your society. And over time, there have been challenges in living my ethics, in living my rights and duties, and making sure that, when these setbacks happen, I'm able to pick myself up and move on to what next. I have always chosen integrity and responsibility as a two markers of my own leadership, helping others and being a mentor to so many in my country, Sierra Leone, and to make sure that my service reflects our current humanity. So through my determination and through the several explanations I believe we've all shared, collective accountability, responsibility matters. And I strive on a personal basis because when I look at ethics, I also have to question myself first to be able to be effective to others, not just to lead, but to uplift, to inspire, knowing that my true and real impact is measured by the values I stand for or the values that I live by, not just by the titles I hold. I think with that, we can caveat to thanking my co-panelists, because I've been part of the conversation. I've really enjoyed listening to you both. And I also think it's perfect timing for us to widen this discussion and hear what our patient audience, both online and in person, have to say on this important discussion. But first, I would like to go to Carnegie Council editor, Alex Woodson, who has a question from our online audience.
Thanks, George. Lots of questions.
Okay.
I just wanted to note some of the nations that are watching today, people watching from these nations: Ghana, Ethiopia, Argentina, Botswana, the Netherlands, Tanzania, Kenya, Cameroon, Ukraine, Liberia, Pakistan, the Philippines, Switzerland, Sierra Leone, lots of people from Sierra Leone, George, India, the Maldives, Rwanda, South Africa, Somalia, Burkina Faso, and I'm sure there are a lot of others too. So a few really good questions. One, how can the ethical choices of today's civic leaders shape the societal norms and values of future generations? A question about how cultural diversity, what role does cultural diversity have to play in ethics? So those are a few to get started.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think maybe we can take further questions from the audience, or maybe we can go ahead and maybe get started with those two. I think let's do it that way, right? Let's get started with those two. So, Katrine.
These are
Difficult.
tough questions. I guess maybe I'll start with the first one, which is just around, what can leaders do in terms of ethical norms for future leaders? I think this was mentioned earlier in the discussion, but how we are kind of at a point where we're seeing maybe an erosion of some of the underpinnings of some of these ethical frameworks that we want to see in our world. We are seeing leaders strip away rights, whether it's here in the United States or elsewhere. We are seeing horrific wars completely, cause mass human suffering for large portions of our populations. It's a gloom world, but what gives me hope is that, in times where leaders are not able to stand up, and I'm kind of thinking governments here, and do, the ethical things, do the things that are needed to continue to support rights and liberties around the world, we're seeing kind of that gap filled with young people, with civic society, whether it's people taking to the streets to call on their governments to, stop sending arms to countries that are perpetuating human rights abuses and wars, whether it is standing up in repressive regimes and calling for more basic rights. I think we're seeing such a groundswell of positive movement from young people, from civil society leaders, from activists, from journalists. We're kind of filling this gap sometimes where I think the broad society is saying these are our values and this is what we want. And if governments aren't delivering it, we're going to do the work that we can to try and push it forward kind of on that local level.
Thank you. Over to you, Zah. What will be your take on that question?
I think as leaders, as young leaders or people who are in touch with, not in touch, but working with people who are learning to become leaders, it's important to pay attention to listening to their voices and see how they see things differently, giving them the space to express their ideas, but also help them, young leaders who are learning civic engagement and ethical leadership, giving them the space to express their ideas, but also helping them implement those ideas. At OSUN, we work with so many young leaders across the world who are working in women empowerment, they're trying to find ways to find solutions for issues that leaders can't, like big leaders in big positions can't today. Or, I think it's important to give the space for them and listen to their voices, because they might see things in a completely different perspective than we do, and they might find a solution that we did not think about at all and didn't cross our minds. For example, in Afghanistan, we have a group of young leaders who we work with at the Open Society University Network and Bard Center for Civic Engagement, who provide academic educational opportunities for women in Afghanistan in a way that is completely safe. And this opportunity and this program is happening right now because they were given this space, because their voices were heard, because they were provided with the resources that they needed in order to implement that project. They do this really interestingly through WhatsApp. It's a very simple app, and they are teaching women English and mindfulness through that. So I think I want to say, reflecting on this question, I think we should always give importance to young voices, give them the floor, give them the space. English is my second language, so if I say things incorrectly, please forgive me. So I think in a nutshell, giving the young voices the space and helping them when it comes to civic engagement, project ideas, and help them learn more how to implement those projects ethically, considering and paying attention and respecting all the principles of ethical leadership.
Thank you very much. I think for my part, just to also really re-echo both of your insight on this very important question. I think the ability for us to know that we are awakened to a sense of responsibility as young people and being able to realize that we have the power, both in the individual and collective voices, I think is something that really gives me hope, that gives me the passion, because sometimes we get a bit deflated when we see things not going away, when things are not changing, when we are backsliding, maybe democratically, or when we are facing challenges, particularly from the global south, from the continent that I've been really engaged with, and seeing things are not going the way they should go in terms of providing social and basic needs and things like that. But just having that courage and that conviction, to know that our voices matters and that we can collectively and individually be able to make some tangible changes, I think gives me hope. And I believe it's very important for us to continue that engagement constructively and civilly in that regard. So I think the second question touched on cultural diversity or the importance of it and things like that. I think you guys are going to really enjoy this question, like myself. So, but I'll start with Catherine on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked about this a little bit as part of just kind of my personal goal of, knowing when to use my conviction in my platform and knowing when to step back and share that. And I think, in all kind of the work that we do, whether it is, things that are like humanitarian aid or human rights research, I think you have to, take into account that there's not a one size fits all solution to every problem in the world. One thing that I learned pretty early on when I was working in Lebanon is that when we would come back to New York and go, to convenings up at the UN or have these meetings at, kind of these decision-making tables, oftentimes it was a lot of people who looked like me who sat there and were talking on behalf of Syrian refugees living in Lebanon. And I think this is changing, which is great, but I think, being able to make sure that there is representation at places of power, at places of decision-making, making sure that, solutions, whether they're things like how we can provide gender-based violence, counseling in different humanitarian or crisis settings, is taking into consideration, it's not just a gender issue. How are we going to integrate men into this? How are we going to integrate people with disabilities? How are we going to integrate all of the different kind of, intersectionalities, I guess, into these, solutions for these problems? So it's a hard thing to do, but I think that, again, just going back to like hope, this is getting better as we see more and more young people taking on positions of power. This seems to be front of mind for so many people, which I think is a good thing to keep working towards.
Thank you very much. I think we can now open the floor to our in-person audience to see, to hear their own perspective on this very important discussion. And as Kevin noted earlier on, if you're interested in asking any question, you can raise your hand and a microphone will be given to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was great listening to you and learning great stuff about keeping those ethics and moving forward with life with responsibility, and also being engaged to the global things that are happening right now. My question is to, I think, all of you, because you're kind of mentioning everything that you were saying were very relevant to each other and related because, well, it was related. So my question is, how do you kind of protect the security or the safety of those involved in, and let's say, the engagements, and trying to give them those spaces to talk or to express themselves? How do you then, I know it's not your job, of course, I mean just your idea, how do we, or how should we protect their safeties when they're expressing those thoughts and they are trying to be engaged with whatever's going on and trying to kind of be on the right side, basically. And sometimes those expressions of those leaders, young leaders, are clashing with the state's interests. How do we set that boundary or safety issues for those people who are trying to be involved? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can answer that, then take further questions. So I'll start with you, Zah, on this one.
Sure, yeah. I think that is a very important question. And I say that because when we work in different environments where political and social situations are different, it's important to pay attention to the safety of those who are trying to take part in problem solving. So I think educating ourselves is I think the first step. At least that's what I do when it comes to providing civic engagement opportunities or spaces for people to speak or share their ideas. Educating ourselves about the environment where we are in, educating ourselves about the political situation, educating ourselves about the sensitivities, and communicating in a clear and understanding and kind manner with the person who is trying to play their role in the problem solving, I think are the first steps to ensuring the safety of those individuals. And I think it's also important to create, if we are giving a space for a person, we have to, if the individuals still want to, sometimes emotions can be very strong, and some individuals might want to really stand up for a topic, so about an issue. And in those situations, I think if we can't play our part in making sure that these individuals understand the sensitivities, we should warn them also about what the consequences might be, or how, or give them a plan B, a different, not a plan B, a different way of approach as a person who's more experienced in that field, doing a little bit of research and work, and giving a different idea, or creating a pathway for the individuals to make sure that they reach their goals and talk about those topics and play their roles in problem solving.
Katrina?
No, I mean, I think that was a great answer. And I was actually thinking back to something that you had said earlier when you were talking about kind of the importance of checking in with people. We all work on, challenging issues in the world. And I think one of the ways that you can kind of help people, especially, human rights offenders or activists who are working in incredibly challenging situations, is also realizing that they are people with very basic needs that need to be met, including their mental and physical well-being and safety. I think that, this was something that you mentioned as a priority in your work. And I think that that's really important, is the work, the physical work that we're all doing, and that these, especially human rights offenders and activists and journalists are doing, is so incredibly important, but it can't be done if your basic needs aren't met and if you aren't able to kind of prioritize your own well-being. So I think that that's kind of a central point in terms of keeping people kind of safe in this work.
Thank you both. I think I will echo the same, and to just save time, I believe understanding and educating yourself about the sensitivities and the political landscape, so succinctly mentioned, I think is very important. And in my role, I may be a bit biased, but as a civic educator for a long time, I think we cannot afford to stop educating and teaching young generations. We cannot. We have to continue, we have to be resilient, and we have to make sure that we understand, as we educate others, we understand our rights and responsibility within that process. So in essence of time, we'll continue to take further questions. So, okay, we have one at the very, thank you.
Hi. So the U.S. employs about, I believe, 300,000 people that work in PR and about 45,000 journalists. So I was wondering if you have ever had any experience working with PR people or spin doctors, people that kind of shift narratives, and how you, I guess, resist the narratives that they, kind of want to, are paid to insert.
Thank you very much. So, Katrina, I think this question is tailor-made for you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. And I think this issue of, deliberate disinformation, government-aligned media that is putting out kind of fabricated and or massage material that very much aligns with government policy or interest is something that's been happening forever. It is certainly something that is increasing and getting so much hard to kind of parse truth and parse what is disinformation, what is manipulated content in the age, not only of obviously the internet, but of AI, which has been able to essentially supercharge disinformation. Governments now are able, as you kind of mentioned, and this is not necessarily in the US, but able to hire, disinformation for hire networks are becoming kind of more rampant all over the world. We see it in places like Egypt, in places like Mexico. It kind of goes across the spectrum of different government types. And, there's so much power and progress that has been brought with the internet, right, in terms of connection and being able to like stay connected to people all over the world, to be able to access information about your local polling place. Like everything in between has been great, but there are also these immense challenges as we continue to kind of tech like move forward. And in terms of kind of countering this disinformation or, pro-government media, it goes back to actually what you were just saying about education, around digital literacy, about, making sure that you are able, and sometimes it's really hard as things get more sophisticated to understand what is, AI generated, what is disinformation, what is a bot putting out versus what is authentic. And this is such a challenge and something that we have kind of been working on in terms of, what tech companies can do, what media organizations can do, what governments can do to make sure that the online space remains not only open and free, but also safe from these harms of disinformation.
Thank you very much. Sir, you have anything to add on that one?
I think everything was mentioned by Catherine. What I want to add would be doing all of that and also trying to find ways to put out correct information too. When you see this information, again, I think see what you can do to not disinform, but actually inform people about the different side of the story, the different side of the information that is being shared. I think that's absolutely important.
Thank you very much. So any further question? Oh, wow, we got plenty. Yes.
Hi, good morning. My name is Abrar. My question, I think it's a follow-up question to the my friend asked over there. My question would be in terms of the results. When we say, when we talk about ethics, when we talk about change, I think Catherine also mentioned that it's not enough. And you also said that it's the young population or the population is kind of declining to be the future leaders. So in terms of the results, how do you communicate those results of change, let's say, to the younger generation? We just talked about like a very distorted world. The young generation is very distracted. So how would you motivate, how would you encourage the young population to be the next generation, to be the next change makers? Basically, my question would be, what kind of tools would you use or what kind of strategies would you use? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very important question, especially because based on our earlier discussion, I think it touched upon so many of the important things that we have to do. So I think I would like to start on this one. I think just to conceptualize it further, I think, we talked about educating a generation. So I think digital literacy is very important. As a civic educator, I've started utilizing that in my farm in Sierra Leone, empowering my student fellows and things like that. As a thing that I conceptualize as citizenship in a digitalized age or the network age, because we cannot do without social media now, particularly our generation. It's very important. So knowing that caveat, that it's important for you to have digital literacy, but it's also important for you to have the basic understanding of civics, the importance of civility, and how you engage constructively, how you criticize, because we can have constructive criticism, we can have something on the other side of it. And I really feel understanding those basic caveats will get us there. And in addition to that, I think collaborating with other people from different cultures can really enhance our global understanding, because you can find some of the different perspective in Kenya, for short, or you can say in Afghanistan or in other places or in Estonia that really have a similar concern as a young person, but he or she is unable to really portray that on a global stage. So collaboration is very important in that regard. So with that, I think I can pass it over to Zah. Maybe you have something else to add to that.
I think that's a really important question. I think that the young generation is not the next generation. I think they're the present generation. I think that we should give them the space to be present and hear their voices, because I think that the way young generation experience things and understand things are very different than more senior leaders do. And I think that their voices should be heard. They should be given this space in political, social, educational, academic, all sectors. They should be given opportunities to incorporate their ideas when it comes to problem solving, creating policies, implementing those policies. They should be given a space to be involved in every sector of the society. And I think we can start here today. I think that there are young people in this room. I think they have ideas. I think after this panel is over, we should speak with them and communicate with them and listen to their ideas and see how can we collaborate moving forward. I think that young people are in today's world with the resources that are available. AI is not only bad, I think it's also been good in educating young people and all of that. So that, yeah.
Thank you, Zara. And Katrin?
Yeah, I guess maybe just really quickly, and I wish there was like a better kind of answer of here are all the tools in this nice, toolbook that you can have. But I think maybe one of the easiest or most tangible things is if you live in a country that holds elections and you're able to participate in the political process, it's to vote. Use your political power that you have. And it's not just in national or legislative elections, it's in local elections. I think that's really important and something that might get kind of swallowed up by the media around elections is that, yes, of course, national general level elections are important, but local politics can have such a more meaningful impact on people's lives. So learning about candidates, educating yourself about what's happening, not just at a national level, but in your neighborhood, whether it's a city council, whether it's a mayoral race, things like that. When those tools are available, I think they're important to be used. And then the other, I think, would be just keep up kind of the pressure, call for what is right. If there's something you're really passionate about, join an organization about it, join a protest, get out there and talk to people. I think that, there's a lot of barriers to entry around politics, but there's also a lot of other kind of avenues to engage at a civic level.
Thank you very much. I think with that, we have time for maybe one more question or two. I think I saw the lady over here. I think I am first. Yeah, thank you.
First of all, thank you all so much for being here. My name is Hana Ashatu, and I was born and raised in Ethiopia, so shout out to those who are watching from home. I'm an educator, but I'm also a graduate student. I work at a high school in Brooklyn, and my question is for my students, basically. A lot of them feel a sense of hopelessness based on, the status of the world. And I have a good amount of students who are also want to go into the international affairs field. So what advice would you have for them, and how can you encourage young citizens?
Thank you very much. I think maybe it's fitting I start, then I'll pass it over quickly. I think one advice I can give is that that you continue to work hard and study, because there's so many issues right now that we have all the tools, or maybe the toolkit, maybe artificial intelligence also have helped, where you can just sit down and say, Google, explain to me about the entirety of the United Nations, or something like that, But I think the ability to continue to study, to continue to expose yourself in your community, to continue to engage with other people. And I think personally, one thing that I can reflect on that has really shaped my understanding of my field as a diplomat now, I think is the power of mentorship. The power of mentorship. I think it's help. You can sort out someone in the desired field. You can sort out someone in the global scale of things. You can follow people who are actually doing what you're actually thinking of doing and things like that. So I think just being able to continue to engage and stay open to learning new things will be one of my own simple advice at this time. I'll pass it over to you, Zara, and then Katrin, maybe you can.
Sure. I think connecting, I understand that, and I think I've heard so much from other young leaders that I work with closely across the Open Society University network in countries like Afghanistan and countries like Gaza, where we're working with young leaders who did civic engagement projects and they have no hope to stay in their country and what they're doing, but focusing on being evacuated and just saving their life. So at times like that, it is really, really hard to have hope. And I think in those times, if we are connected with those individuals, it's important to remind them of the resources that are available that they can use in order to continue the important work that it is that they are doing. But then also using our resources on a bigger scale. I think the next step would be letting them know about the positive things that are happening. For example, in Afghanistan right now, education is banned for women after 6th grade. They cannot go to the right to work or be in public spaces, and they don't have this right. Women can't go to park or university. At times like this, we try, the people who are connected with the people who are losing hope, the hopeful people that are connected with the people who are losing hope, it's their responsibility. It's a part of the ethical leadership that they should follow to make sure that those individuals are connected to the right resources and raise awareness about the positive, continue to talk about the positive things that are happening and let them know that this will pass, and this will pass if you continue the fight that you are doing right now. There will be a positive outcome.
Thank you, Zah and Katrin.
Yeah, I'll be very brief, and I guess I echo what both of the other panelists said, but I think it's a scary time, right, around the world. It's very easy to get caught up in like the news headlines and the doom and gloom of everything, and there are some incredibly real challenges that need to be dealt with. But in terms of what younger students might be thinking about if they're feeling a little like apathetic or scared of joining into this fight, one thing I like to remind people is certainly the world is not perfect. There are many, many challenges and many kind of horrific things that are happening. However, when we started our Freedom in the World report over 50 years ago, there were, I think, only like 40 something countries around the world that were rated free, where people were able to experience their full rights and freedoms. Today, that number is up to around 84 countries. So, democracy, freedom is not a sprint, it is a marathon. If you look back and kind of contextualize it over time, the world is increasingly getting more free. People are having more rights. It does not mean that the work is over, but I think it's important to put it in context that this moment in time is hard, but if you look back, things are slowly getting better. We need to just continue pushing kind of that marathon forward.
I think I will agree. I will agree to that, definitely. It's a marathon, of course. But with that, I think we'll have time for one last question. The gentleman at the back.
Hello, everyone. I have a question. How can you follow the etiquette when the time is very important? And is it reasonable to break the rules in order to solve a problem affecting a group of people, not just individuals, especially when there is no time to create a plan B? It's about when you mentioned the topic about the evacuation of the women in Afghanistan. And the second question, do you think the rules of the etiquette can change over time?
Okay. It's a double letter. We'll start with you. Yeah.
I think the short answer is when it comes to breaking the rules to do the ethical thing, yes. And I think we did that during the evacuations of the students. We evacuated, and I want to say that at that time, I think one of the reasons that Bard College Annandale, Open Society University Network, and a number of other local and international organizations that were involved in working with us could not evacuate over 270 students, a number that I think is higher than any other evacuee group by other international organizations. I think that wouldn't have been possible if we did not pay attention to the limited time that we had, and if we didn't find plan Bs and work our way around an evacuation of the students. At that time, when the Taliban first took over Afghanistan, the rule was already in place. It was just because of the chaos that was happening, there were not enough resources for the new current regime in Afghanistan to really implement their rule, this rule of women not leaving the country. So we had to use that time, as chaotic as it was, as an opportunity to find a way to evacuate our students. And we worked breaking the rules with the government of Pakistan, the Netherlands, the government of US, the government of Kyrgyzstan, which is a small country very close to Kazakhstan, to collect all those documents to evacuate our students. And not all rules and laws were followed. And I think that is because not all rules and laws were followed and the time was very limited, that resulted in a successful evacuation and having our students in the US. And we would have, if we did follow the rules, I don't think we would have been able to evacuate that number of students. And it was really important for us to do so because only a year before the takeover of the new regime, we had a student who was killed in Afghanistan, Fatima Khalil, because she was graduated from the American University of Central Asia and because she was working for the Human Rights Commission in Afghanistan. That would have been the case for a lot of our students because they were students in an American institution. So, yes.
So, Katrina, any last thoughts on that one? Sure.
I mean, I think Czar covered that pretty succinctly. So yeah, I don't have much more to add except that I want to just hear more about the work that you do because it sounds so important.
I was just about to say the same thing. Thank you, everyone. So with that, I think we have come to the end of our program for today. I would like to take this time to thank each and everyone for coming to our forum today and for celebrating Global Ethics Day with us here at the Carnegie Council. And for those who have joined us online and to our in-person audience, and for those who will be watching this webcast at a later time at their own leisure, we say thank you. Of course, a special thanks goes to our Joel, to Kevin, to everyone who have made this event and this day possible as we continue to use the power of ethics to build a better world. Or as we say here in Carnegie Council, ethics empowered. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.